The sound of glass shattering against the wall next to my head is something I'll never forget. My own son, my flesh and blood, had just thrown his graduation photo frame at me, missing by inches. "Stay out of my life!" he screamed, his face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. "You're ruining everything!" The venom in his voice turned my blood to ice. My beautiful boy, my Tyler, now 23 and unrecognizable, stood before me with hatred in his eyes. Just 4 hours later, his number would flash on my phone at 2:17 a.m. from the county jail. I remember sinking to my knees among the broken glass, cutting my palms as I tried to salvage the photo inside the shattered frame. It was Tyler at 18, with his bright smile and hopeful eyes, wearing his cap and gown. The edges were torn now, just like my heart. The house in Westport, Connecticut that I'd worked double shifts to afford for 15 years suddenly felt hollow, haunted by the ghost of the relationship we once had. "Get up, Martha," I whispered to myself, pushing up from the floor. At 52, my knees protested, but I'd learned to carry on through pain. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the kitchen, where Tyler and I had shared thousands of meals. Now he was gone, peeling out of the driveway in the car I still made payments on, leaving nothing but the lingering scent of expensive cologne that his new friends wore. I didn't cry. Not yet. The numbness was a blessing as I swept up the glass, careful to preserve every shard of the frame that had sat on our mantel for 5 years. Each piece felt like a fragment of our relationship, once whole, now impossible to put back together without the cracks showing. The argument had started over money, as they often did these days. Tyler had dropped out of community college 8 months ago, promising it was temporary. He'd found opportunities with new friends who dressed too well for people without jobs. I'd noticed the changes slowly, the designer clothes, the late nights, the secretive phone calls. When I found the wad of cash in his dresser while putting away laundry, I knew something was wrong. "You went through my stuff?" he'd shouted when I confronted him, his handsome face, so like his father's, twisting with indignation. "That's my private property. I was putting away your clothes," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Tyler, there's over $2,000 here. Where did it come from?" "I earned it," he snapped, snatching the money from my hands. "Not all of us want to waste our lives making minimum wage like you." The words stung like a slap. 15 years of cleaning offices after my teaching job, of skipping meals so he could have new sneakers for school, of sleeping 4 hours a night so I could help with his homework, all dismissed as wasting my life. "Tyler," I'd said, forcing myself to stay calm, "I'm worried about you. These new friends, the sudden money, please tell me you're not involved in something illegal." That's when his eyes changed, turning cold and distant. "You don't know anything about my life." "I'm your mother," I said, reaching for his arm. "I've been there for every moment of your life. When your father left—" "Don't," he shouted, jerking away from me. "Don't bring him into this. At least Dad had ambition. He didn't settle for being a nobody." The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts as I finished sweeping up the glass. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, mother's intuition perhaps, made me pick up. "Mrs. Reynolds?" An unfamiliar voice asked. "This is Detective Sawyer with the Westport Police Department. We have your son Tyler in custody." My hand gripped the counter for support. "What happened? Is he hurt?" "He's physically fine, ma'am, but he's been arrested in connection with a narcotics distribution case we've been building. He was caught with a significant amount of cocaine and several unregistered firearms." The room spun around me. My son, drugs, guns, words that shouldn't exist in the same sentence. "There's something else," the detective continued, his voice softening slightly. "Your son gave up some pretty valuable information about his suppliers, people who won't be happy about it. For his safety, we're discussing witness protection options." Witness protection. My son, who moments ago wanted me out of his life, might disappear from it entirely. "Can I see him?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "He's actually asked to see you," the detective replied, surprise evident in his tone. "Said you'd know what to do. Said you always do." I looked down at my bleeding hands, cut from the broken frame and the shards of my relationship with my only child. 4 hours ago, he couldn't stand the sight of me. Now, he believed I could fix this impossible situation. Somehow, I would have to try. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already reaching for my purse and keys. As I drove through the familiar streets of Westport, the reality of the situation crashed over me in waves. My son was in jail. My son was in danger. My son needed me. Despite everything, despite the words that couldn't be unsaid, the bond between us remained, damaged but unbroken, like the photo I'd rescued from the shattered frame. My name is Martha Reynolds, and until yesterday, I thought I understood the shape of my life. A 52-year-old single mother with graying hair, I color myself every 3 weeks, living in a modest colonial in Westport, Connecticut, a town where most families have 2 luxury cars in the driveway and vacation homes in Vermont. I have neither, but I managed to give my son a stable home in a good school district by working myself to exhaustion for 15 years. By day, I teach 8th grade English at Westport Middle School. By night, I clean offices in the corporate parks along I-95. My colleagues at school don't know about my second job. I keep a change of clothes in my car and use the gym showers before heading to the office buildings. Pride is a luxury I couldn't afford after Richard, my ex-husband, left us for his 26-year-old paralegal when Tyler was just 8. The morning after Tyler's arrest, I sat in my kitchen clutching a mug of cold coffee, watching the sunrise paint the walls a soft gold. I'd spent the night at the police station, talking to detectives and a court-appointed attorney who looked too young to have finished law school. Tyler had been transferred to the county jail in Bridgeport, and I wouldn't be allowed to see him until visiting hours later that day. My small kitchen still bore the scars of yesterday's fight. A dent in the wall where the frame had hit, a scratch on the hardwood floor from when Tyler had kicked over a chair. The kitchen table was covered with papers the detective had given me. Information about the case, about witness protection, about what happens when your child is caught with enough drugs to put him in prison for decades. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane, my closest friend and fellow English teacher. "You okay? Didn't see you in the teacher's lounge this morning." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How could I possibly explain that my son was in jail, that he might have to disappear into witness protection, that my entire world had imploded in less than 24 hours? Caught a stomach bug. Taking a sick day. Talk later. The lie came easily. Just another in a long line of omissions and half-truths I'd told to maintain the facade of normalcy over the years. No one at school knew about the second job, about the times our electricity had been shut off, about the night Tyler had found me crying over past due medical bills. I set my phone down and looked around the kitchen. Photos of Tyler lined the walls. Baby pictures, little league games, high school graduation. The progression of a life I thought I was guiding toward something good, something stable. Where had I gone wrong? When had the sweet boy who once made me handprint Mother's Day cards turned into a stranger dealing drugs and carrying guns? The day Richard left us plays in my mind like a movie I've watched too many times. It was a Tuesday in April, unusually warm. I'd picked Tyler up from soccer practice, and we were making spaghetti, his favorite, when Richard came home early from the law firm where he worked. He didn't even take off his coat before telling me he was leaving. He'd already signed a lease on a new apartment. He'd already moved most of his important belongings. He'd already started a new life that didn't include us. Tyler stood in the kitchen doorway, sauce-covered wooden spoon in hand, watching his father pack the last of his things. "Are you coming back for dinner tomorrow?" he'd asked, his 8-year-old mind unable to comprehend the permanence of what was happening. Richard had knelt down, put his hands on Tyler's shoulders. "No, buddy, but we'll have dinner together soon, at my new place." Those dinners grew less and less frequent, as Richard built his new family with Melissa, the paralegal. By the time Tyler was in high school, they might see each other once every few months. Each time Tyler came home from these visits, he was quieter, more withdrawn. Richard's life in Greenwich with Melissa and their twin daughters represented everything we didn't have: wealth, connections, opportunities. The child support checks came regularly. I'll give Richard that much. But they covered barely a third of our expenses. So I took the night job, cleaning the offices of people like my ex-husband, emptying trash cans filled with coffee cups that cost more than what I made in an hour. I got up from the kitchen table and walked to the hallway closet, pulling out an old shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were all the cards and letters Tyler had written me over the years. Birthday cards with wobbly handwriting, notes saying, "I love you, Mom," slipped under my bedroom door after we'd argued. A handmade coupon book from middle school offering free hugs and dishwashing services. The Tyler in these mementos seemed impossibly distant from the angry young man who had thrown a frame at my head, from the frightened boy I'd glimpsed briefly in a police station holding cell. The last item in the box was a Father's Day card Tyler had made in 4th grade. His teacher, not knowing about our situation, had had the whole class make them. Tyler had come home, and instead of throwing it away, had crossed out Dad and written Mom instead, adding at the bottom, "Because you do both jobs." I pressed the card to my chest and finally allowed myself to cry, deep, racking sobs that bent me double on the hallway floor. The sound of my phone ringing pulled me back to the present. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Reynolds?" The voice belonged to a woman, professional, but warm. "This is Special Agent Diana Foster with the U.S. Marshals Service. I understand your son may be entering our witness protection program." "Yes," I managed, my voice hoarse from crying. "The detective mentioned that yesterday. I'd like to meet with you to discuss the process," she said. "There are decisions that need to be made quickly." "Decisions?" "Yes, including whether you will be joining your son in the program." The question hit me like a physical blow. Leave everything. My job, my home, my identity. To follow Tyler into a new, unknown life? Or stay behind and likely never see my child again? "Can you come to our field office in New Haven this afternoon?" Agent Foster asked. "I need to see my son first," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "He's at the county jail. I need to talk to him before I make any decisions." "I understand," Agent Foster replied. "Visiting hours at Bridgeport begin at 1. I can meet you at our New Haven office at 4. Will that work?" "Yes," I said, already mentally calculating what I needed to do before then. Call the school to arrange a longer absence. Contact my night job. Pack a bag in case... In case what? In case I decided to disappear from my own life? "Mrs. Reynolds," Agent Foster said before hanging up, "I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that your son gave up some very valuable information. He may have helped us take down one of the largest drug operations in the Northeast. That was a brave thing to do. Brave. Not a word I would have associated with Tyler's actions lately. But maybe, somewhere beneath the anger and poor choices, my son was still the person I'd raised him to be. "Thank you," I said, though the words felt inadequate. After hanging up, I stood in my silent house, surrounded by the artifacts of a life that might soon be behind me. I went to my bedroom and pulled a suitcase from under the bed, then stopped, unsure what to pack for a journey into the unknown. The county jail in Bridgeport was a concrete monstrosity that seemed designed to crush hope. I sat in the visitation area, a room with scarred tables bolted to the floor and uncomfortable plastic chairs. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everyone in a sickly pallor that made it hard to distinguish between guards and visitors. When they brought Tyler in, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone were the designer clothes and the confident swagger. In their place was a hollow-eyed young man in an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame, as though he'd lost weight overnight. His hands were cuffed in front of him, and there was a small cut above his right eyebrow that hadn't been there when I'd seen him at the police station. 10 minutes, the guard said gruffly before stepping back to the wall. Tyler sat across from me, his eyes downcast. "Thanks for coming," he mumbled, so quietly I had to lean forward to hear him. "What happened to your head?" I asked, fighting the maternal urge to reach across and examine the wound. "It's nothing," he said, finally meeting my gaze. "Just a little welcome present from the other inmates. They know I talked." My stomach clenched. "The marshal called me, Agent Foster. She wants to meet about the witness protection program." Tyler nodded slowly. "They said it's my only option. These people I was working for, they don't mess around, Mom. They kill snitches." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment, I saw my little boy again, scared of the monsters under his bed. "Tell me everything, Tyler," I said, folding my hands on the table to keep them from shaking. "I need to understand how we got here." He took a deep breath. "It started about a year ago. I met this guy, Devin, at a party. He seemed cool, had money, nice car. Said he could hook me up with easy work that paid well." Tyler's eyes darted to the guard, then back to me. "At first, it was just delivering packages. I didn't even know what was in them. Or at least, that's what I told myself." "But you did know?" I said. Not a question. Tyler nodded, shame coloring his pale cheeks. "Yeah, I knew. But the money was good, Mom. Really good. And Devin introduced me to his boss, Marcus. Marcus took a liking to me, said I was smart, reliable. Started giving me more responsibility. Responsibility," I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. for distributing drugs. Not just distributing, Tyler whispered. They had me keeping track of payments, managing other runners. I was good with numbers, Always have been. Yes, he had been. Math had been his best subject. I used to imagine him becoming an engineer or an architect, never a bookkeeper for a drug ring. So what happened? Why did they arrest you? Tyler's cuffed hands fidgeted on the table. Marcus has this girlfriend, Alicia. She and I, we got close. His eyes flicked up to gauge my reaction. Too close. Someone told Marcus and he flipped out. Sent some guys to teach me a lesson. I thought of the bruises I'd noticed on Tyler's ribs a few weeks ago when he was changing shirts in the laundry room. He'd claimed they were from a pickup basketball game. I got scared, Tyler continued. Thought about running, but I knew they'd find me. Then I remembered this detective who'd tried to flip me a few months back. Gave me his card. I called him. Told him I wanted to make a deal. And that's when they arrested you. During this deal. Tyler looked away, and I knew there was more to the story. Tyler, I pressed. What aren't you telling me? The detective, Sawyer. He wanted proof I was serious. Said I needed to wear a wire, get Marcus on tape. But Marcus is careful, never talks business directly. So Sawyer told me to get something from Marcus's office. Something that would prove what they were doing. I closed my eyes, already seeing where this was heading. You stole from them. It was a ledger, Tyler said, his voice barely audible. All the transactions, suppliers, everything. I took it from the safe when Marcus was distracted with Alicia. He swallowed hard, but his security guy caught me leaving. There was a fight. I ran, but they caught up to me a few blocks away. I had the drugs and guns in my car. They weren't even mine, Mom. I was just moving them for Marcus. And then the police showed up. So Marcus knows you took the ledger? Knows you were trying to turn evidence against him? Tyler nodded miserably. By now, he knows I've talked too. That's why the marshals are moving so fast. Marcus has people everywhere. Cops, judges. He's connected. The gravity of the situation settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't just about Tyler getting into trouble. This was life. Or death. The marshal mentioned that I might need to go into witness protection with you, I said carefully. Something flickered in Tyler's eyes. Relief, maybe. Or guilt. They told me that might be possible. But Mom, you'd have to leave everything. Your job, your friends, our house. And if I don't? Tyler's gaze dropped to his cuffed hands. Then I go alone. New name, new place. And we couldn't have contact. It would be too dangerous. They could use you to get to me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. After everything, after all the sacrifices and struggles, I might never see my son again. Is that what you want? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. After yesterday, when you said you wanted me out of your life, Tyler flinched as though I'd struck him. I didn't mean that. You know I didn't mean that. Do I? The question escaped before I could stop it, carrying with it months of worry and hurt. Because it seemed like you meant it when you threw that frame at me. When you said I was ruining your life. I was scared, Tyler admitted, his voice breaking. I knew things were falling apart with Marcus. I knew I was in too deep. And then you found the money. Started asking questions. He looked up, his eyes swimming with tears. It was easier to push you away than to admit how badly I'd screwed up. How disappointed you'd be. Tyler, I started, but he cut me off. There's something else you need to know, he said, glancing at the guard to check how much time we had left. About Dad. My heart stuttered. What about him? He knew, Tyler said, the words falling between us like stones. About what I was doing. I told him months ago when he took me to dinner for my birthday. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Richard had known our son was involved in criminal activity and had said nothing. Had done nothing. He said it wasn't his business, Tyler continued, his voice flat. Said I was an adult making my own choices. Then he asked me not to mention it around Melissa or the girls. Said it would upset them. I sat back in my chair, momentarily speechless. While I had been worrying about Tyler's new clothes and late nights, his own father had known the truth and chosen to look the other way. I called him, Tyler added, twisting the final knife, from the police station, before I called you. He said, Tyler's voice cracked again. He said I'd made my bed and had to lie in it. Said his lawyer only handled corporate cases. Then he hung up. The guard stepped forward. Time's up. Tyler looked up, panic flashing across his face. Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. I need you. I don't know what to do. As the guard moved to take Tyler back to his cell, I found my voice again. I'll be at the marshal's office this afternoon, I said, standing on legs that felt unsteady. We'll figure this out, Tyler. Together. Relief washed over his face. Thank you, he whispered as the guard led him away. I remained standing until Tyler disappeared through the secure door, then sank back into the plastic chair, my mind reeling. Richard had known, and said nothing, even as our son sank deeper into a world that could now cost him his life. As I gathered my purse to leave, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the message made my blood freeze in my veins. Tell your son to keep his mouth shut. We know where you live. We know where you work. This can end one of two ways. His choice. I looked up quickly, scanning the visitation room for anyone watching me, but saw only other worried families saying goodbye to their incarcerated loved ones. With shaking hands, I showed the text to the nearest guard, who immediately called for his supervisor. 20 minutes later, I was being escorted to my car by 2 armed guards. Drive straight to the marshal's office in New Haven, one of them instructed. Don't stop. Don't go home. They'll be expecting you. As I pulled out of the jail parking lot, I caught sight of a black SUV with tinted windows idling near the exit. It pulled into traffic behind me, keeping a consistent distance. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I pressed the accelerator, heading for the highway that would take me to New Haven, away from the home I might never see again. The drive to New Haven should have taken 45 minutes, but I made it in 30, constantly checking my rearview mirror for the black SUV. It had disappeared somewhere on the highway, but that provided little comfort. The text message had made it clear. They knew where to find me, where to find Tyler. As I sat in Agent Foster's office, a sparse room with government-issue furniture and blinds drawn tight against the windows, memories of Tyler's childhood played through my mind like a slideshow of a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. Mrs. Reynolds? Agent Foster's voice pulled me back to the present. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with short dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I understand you received a threat after visiting your son. I nodded, sliding my phone across her desk. This came right after our visit ended. She read the message, her expression giving away nothing. This is consistent with how Marcus Delgado's organization operates. They prefer intimidation first, violence second. You know who sent this? We have a good idea, she replied, making a note in the file open before her. Mrs. Reynolds, I need to be very clear about something. Your son has provided information that could dismantle one of the most dangerous drug networks in the Northeast, but that makes both of you targets. I thought of my small house in Westport, the garden I'd tended for 15 years, the classroom where my students would be waiting for me to return. How long? I asked. If we go into witness protection, how long before we could come back to our lives? Agent Foster's expression softened slightly. That's not how the program works. If you and Tyler enter WITSEC, it's permanent. New identities, new location, no contact with anyone from your past lives. Ever. The finality of her words settled over me like a weight. And if I choose not to go, then Tyler would enter the program alone. You would remain Martha Reynolds, continue your life in Westport, but you could never contact your son again. For his safety and yours. Never see Tyler again. The thought was inconceivable. Despite everything, the arguments, the lies, the broken frame thrown in anger, he was my son, my only child, the center around which my entire life had orbited for 23 years. I need a moment, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Of course, Agent Foster replied, standing. I'll give you some privacy. There's water in that pitcher if you need it. When the door closed behind her, I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. Tyler at 3, dressed as a lion for Halloween, roaring at our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, who played along by pretending to be terrified. Tyler at 7, standing on a kitchen chair to help me frost Christmas cookies, his tongue poking out in concentration as he carefully applied red sprinkles to a lopsided star. Tyler at 10, the first Christmas after Richard left, insisting we maintain our tradition of matching pajamas on Christmas Eve. He'd saved his allowance for weeks to buy us both flannel pants with penguins on them. Tyler at 13, gangly and awkward, Coming home from school with a bloody nose and torn backpack after standing up to bullies who were harassing a smaller child. I'd cleaned his face with gentle hands, telling him I was proud of his courage, even as I worried about his growing tendency to solve problems with his fists. Tyler at 16, learning to drive in our ancient Honda, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his face a mask of concentration as he navigated the empty school parking lot on a Sunday afternoon. Later that year, when he got his license, he insisted on driving me to work each morning, setting his alarm an hour early to make sure I arrived on time. Tyler at 18, walking across the stage at graduation, turning to find me in the crowd and giving me a thumbs up when he thought no one was looking. That night, he'd hugged me fiercely and whispered, "We made it, Mom. All those nights you worked 2 jobs. All those times you helped me with homework when you were exhausted. It was worth it. I'm going to make you proud." Where had that boy gone? When had he turned into someone who could get involved with drug dealers, who could lie to my face for months, who could throw things at me in anger? But even as I asked myself these questions, I knew the answer. The signs had been there, building slowly after high school, the mounting pressure as he watched his friends from wealthy families go off to expensive universities while he enrolled in community college, the growing resentment during visits with Richard, where he glimpsed the life he might have had if his father had stayed, the increasing awareness of the sacrifices I'd made, which somehow morphed from gratitude into a burden of expectation he felt he couldn't meet. I remembered a conversation from about a year ago, shortly before he dropped out of college. "What's the point?" he'd asked, tossing his textbook aside in frustration. "I'll be in debt for decades, and for what? So I can get some entry-level job making barely more than minimum wage? Meanwhile, Dad's stepdaughters are going to Yale and Brown, all expenses paid. An education is never wasted," I'd replied, the teacherly platitude sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Easy for you to say," he'd muttered. "You have 2 degrees and still clean toilets at night." The words had stung, not because they were cruel, but because they contained a kernel of truth I'd tried to shield him from. My education hadn't protected me from financial hardship after Richard left. My degrees hadn't prevented me from taking a second job to make ends meet. But I'd persevered. I'd found ways to make our modest life meaningful. I'd taught Tyler to value experiences over possessions, relationships over status. At least I thought I had. The day Tyler was born remains the most vivid memory of my life. 36 hours of labor, Richard passing out twice and being more of a patient than a support. And then suddenly, there he was. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire maternity ward. The nurse had placed him in my arms, this tiny stranger who was somehow also the most familiar person I'd ever met. "Hello, Tyler," I'd whispered, counting his fingers and toes, marveling at the impossible softness of his skin. "I've been waiting for you." In that moment, I'd made a silent promise to him. I would protect him, guide him, love him unconditionally. I would be the constant in his life, the foundation upon which he could build his own dreams, the safe harbor to which he could always return. Even in my exhausted, hormone-addled state, I'd understood that this promise would require sacrifices. What I hadn't understood was how many forms those sacrifices would take over the years. The career opportunities declined because they would require travel. The relationships that withered because I prioritized being home with Tyler. The small indulgences, new clothes, haircuts, occasional dinners out, that I gave up so Tyler could have what he needed. I didn't regret any of it. Not the second job, not the nights of 4 hours sleep, not the dates declined or the promotions passed over. Every choice had been made with clear eyes and a willing heart, because Tyler was worth it, is worth it. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my memories. Agent Foster re-entered, carrying a manila folder. "Have you made a decision, Mrs. Reynolds?" she asked, resuming her seat across from me. Had I? The logical part of my brain argued for staying behind, keeping my job, my pension, the life I'd built through years of hard work. But my heart, the part that had made that silent promise in the hospital room 23 years ago, already knew the answer. "I'll go with him," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Whatever it takes, wherever we need to go, I won't abandon my son." Agent Foster nodded, neither approving nor disapproving, simply acknowledging my choice. "There are forms you'll need to sign, and we need to discuss the logistics. Normally, this process takes weeks, But given the threat level, we're expediting everything. You could be relocated as early as tomorrow. Tomorrow, I repeated, the reality of what I was agreeing to suddenly hitting me full force. But my job, my house, we'll handle all of that, Agent Foster assured me. The program includes financial support until you can establish yourself with new employment. As for your house and possessions, you'll need to decide what to do with them. Sell, rent, or simply walk away. But you can't take much with you. Just a suitcase of clothing and perhaps a few small mementos that couldn't identify you. Just a suitcase. 15 years in that house, 29 years as a teacher, 52 years as Martha Reynolds, all reduced to whatever could fit in a single suitcase. What about Tyler's case? I asked. Will he still face charges? Agent Foster opened the folder she'd brought in. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. The U.S. attorney is offering your son a deal. In exchange for his testimony against Marcus Delgado and his organization, all charges would be dropped. He would enter witness protection with a clean slate. He would testify in court? Wouldn't that be dangerous? Extremely, Agent Foster acknowledged, but necessary if we want to put Delgado away for good. We would take every precaution to protect Tyler's identity during the trial, but yes, there would be risk involved. I thought of the text message on my phone, the implied threat clear. These people didn't make idle warnings. They had found my number, knew where I worked and lived. What else did they know? Does Tyler know about this deal? I asked. His attorney was briefed this morning. I believe they're discussing it now. I nodded slowly, trying to process all of this information. When can I see him again? We'll arrange a secure meeting tomorrow morning. If he accepts the deal and you both agree to enter the program, that's when the process will begin. New identities, new location, new lives. She paused, studying my face. It's a lot to take in, I know. It is, I agreed. But I've rebuilt my life before. When Tyler's father left, I thought the world was ending. But we survived. We'll survive this too. Agent Foster's professional demeanor softened slightly. Mrs. Reynolds, if I may, not everyone would make the choice you're making. Walking away from everything for a son who, by your own account, hasn't treated you well lately. I thought of Tyler in his orange jumpsuit, the fear in his eyes, the way he'd said, "I need you," with such raw honesty. I thought of the text message threatening us both. I thought of the silent promise I'd made in that hospital room 23 years ago. He's my son, I said simply. That doesn't change no matter what. I spent the night in a safe house, a nondescript apartment in a building owned by the U.S. Marshals Service. Agent Foster had advised against returning to my home in Westport, a warning that became more urgent when she received word that someone had broken into my house just hours after I'd left for the jail. The thought of strangers going through my belongings, looking for information about Tyler or me, made my skin crawl. The safe house was impersonal and sterile, beige walls, functional furniture, nothing that could identify its temporary occupants. I lay awake most of the night, staring at unfamiliar shadows on an unfamiliar ceiling, wondering if this was what my future would look like. Anonymous apartments in anonymous towns, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering if today was the day our cover would be blown. Morning came with a gray drizzle that matched my mood. Agent Foster arrived at 7, bearing coffee and a change of clothes she'd purchased for me, since I had nothing but what I'd been wearing the day before. We'll be meeting with Tyler at a secure location at 9, she explained as I accepted the coffee gratefully. His attorney will be there, along with representatives from the U.S. Attorney's Office to finalize the deal. Have you heard if he's accepting it? I asked. All indications are that he will, she replied. It's his best option, Mrs. Reynolds. Without the deal, he's looking at a minimum of 15 years. I nodded, trying not to think about what those 15 years would look like for my son. What happens after the meeting? If everything goes as planned, you'll both be processed into the WITSEC program immediately. New identities will be issued, and you'll be transported to your new location. Which is where? Agent Foster shook her head. I don't know yet. That decision is made by a different division, and they don't share that information until the last possible moment. For security, of course. The fewer people who knew where we were going, the safer we would be. Still, the uncertainty of it all, not knowing where I would be living tomorrow, what name I would be using, what my new life would look like, was overwhelming. The secure location turned out to be a small conference room in the federal building, with no windows and a door guarded by 2 U.S. Marshals. When Tyler was brought in, escorted by another marshal, I barely recognized him. The orange jumpsuit was gone, replaced by civilian clothes, jeans, and a plain blue shirt that hung loose on his frame. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he'd slept no better than I had. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking as he moved toward me. I opened my arms, and he collapsed into them like he had as a child after a nightmare. I held him tight, feeling the tremors running through his body. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, though I had no way of knowing if that was true. We were given a few minutes alone before the others arrived. Tyler pulled back from the embrace, wiping his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. "They told me you're coming with me," he said, his voice low and uncertain. "Into witness protection." "Yes," I confirmed. "We'll go together." He shook his head, confusion and guilt warring in his expression. "But Mom, you'll lose everything. Your job, your friends, the house. Things," I said firmly. "Just things, Tyler. They can be replaced. You can't." Before he could respond, the door opened, and several people entered the room. Agent Foster, a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Assistant U.S. Attorney James Harrington, a younger woman who was Tyler's court-appointed attorney, and 2 more people from the Marshal's Service. What followed was a blur of legal terminology, paperwork, and solemn warnings about the seriousness of what we were undertaking. Tyler would testify against Marcus Delgado and key members of his organization. In exchange, all charges against him would be dropped, and we would both enter witness protection. The trial was expected to begin in 6 months, during which time we would be settled in our new location, under our new identities. "Do you understand the terms of this agreement, Mr. Reynolds?" Harrington asked, sliding a document across the table to Tyler. Tyler glanced at his attorney, who nodded encouragingly, then at me. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Yes," he said, picking up the pen. "I understand." As he signed his name for what would likely be the last time as Tyler Reynolds, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Raised voices, a thud, then the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. The marshals in the room reacted instantly, one moving to the door with weapon drawn, the other positioning himself between us and whatever threat might be coming. Agent Foster had her hand on her sidearm, her body tense and alert. "Get them down," she ordered sharply, and the marshal nearest to us pushed Tyler and me to the floor. I heard more shouting in the hallway, another gunshot, then an eerie silence that seemed more frightening than the noise. "Clear," someone finally called from outside the room. "Suspect is down. Clear." Agent Foster moved to the door, spoke briefly with someone outside, then turned back to us, her expression grim. "Everyone stay where you are. The building is on lockdown." "What happened?" Harrington demanded, straightening his tie as he rose from his crouched position behind the table. "Someone attempted to breach security," Agent Foster replied, her voice clipped. "A man with fake credentials. He had a weapon." My blood ran cold. Was he after Tyler? Agent Foster's hesitation was answer enough. "We don't know that for certain yet, but given the timing..." "Oh God," Tyler whispered beside me. "It's Marcus. He found out about the deal." The marshal helped us to our feet, but kept us away from the door and the single small window that looked out into the hallway. I could see figures moving past, some in tactical gear, others in suits similar to Harrington's. "The building is secure," Agent Foster assured us, though her hand remained near her weapon. "But this changes things. We need to move you both immediately." "The paperwork," Harrington began, "can be completed at the next location." Agent Foster cut him off. "Their safety is the priority now." What followed was a blur of activity. Tyler and I were separated briefly, he to collect the few belongings he'd been allowed to keep from jail, me to sign final documents authorizing the Marshal's Service to handle the disposition of my home and possessions. We were reunited in an underground parking garage, where a convoy of unmarked cars waited. "You'll be taken to a temporary holding location," Agent Foster explained, as a marshal checked the SUV we would be traveling in. "You'll remain there until your new identities are processed and your relocation is arranged." "How long will that take?" I asked, clutching the small bag containing the clothes Agent Foster had purchased for me and a few toiletries provided by the Marshal's Service. 24 to 48 hours, she replied. "I know this is happening very quickly, Mrs. Reynolds, but the attempt today confirms what we suspected. Marcus Delgado knows about the deal and is willing to go to extreme lengths to prevent Tyler from testifying." Tyler stood beside me, his face a mask of guilt and fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so low only I could hear. "This is all my fault. I got us into this." I squeezed his arm, not trusting myself to speak. What could I say? That it was okay? It wasn't. That I forgave him? I did. But forgiveness wouldn't erase the danger we were in, the lives we were leaving behind. As we prepared to enter the SUV, a black sedan screeched into the garage, cutting off our access to the exit ramp. Agent Foster and the other marshals drew their weapons, pushing Tyler and me behind them in the vehicle. "Federal agents!" Foster shouted. "Stop the vehicle!" Instead, the sedan's windows rolled down, and I caught a glimpse of the muzzle of a gun. "Get down!" someone yelled, and then the world exploded into noise and chaos. I felt Tyler's body covering mine as bullets pinged off the concrete pillars and the SUV behind us. The marshals returned fire, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Glass shattered, metal screamed as bullets tore through it, and somewhere, a car alarm began to wail. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. I heard shouting, footsteps running, a car engine revving. Tyler's weight was heavy on top of me, his breathing ragged in my ear. "Tyler," I managed, trying to shift beneath him. "Are you hurt?" No answer. "Tyler." I pushed harder, panic rising in my throat. When I finally managed to turn, what I saw stole the breath from my lungs. Blood. So much blood spreading across the front of Tyler's blue shirt. His eyes were open but unfocused, his face pale as paper. "Help!" I screamed, cradling his head in my lap. "He's been shot! Someone help him!" Agent Foster appeared beside me, her face grim as she assessed Tyler's wound. "We need medical now," she barked into her radio. "Officer down, civilian casualty, GSW to the chest." Tyler's eyes found mine, fear and confusion swirling in their depths. "Mom," he whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't talk," I pleaded, pressing my hand against the wound in his chest, feeling his warm blood seep between my fingers. "Save your strength. Help is coming." But even as I said the words, I could feel him slipping away. His breathing became more labored, his skin colder beneath my touch. In the distance, I heard sirens, but they seemed to be coming from the end of a long tunnel. "Stay with me, Tyler," I begged, my tears falling onto his pale face. "Please, baby, stay with me. I can't lose you. Not like this." His hand found mine, his grip surprisingly strong. "Remember when I was little," he gasped, each word clearly costing him tremendous effort. "You said, no matter what, you'd always love me." "I do," I sobbed, bending close to his face. "I've always loved you. I always will." A ghost of a smile touched his bloodied lips. "I know," he whispered. "That's why I turned myself in. Couldn't let them hurt you." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Tyler hadn't been caught by chance. He'd gone to the police, worn a wire, stolen the ledger, not just to save himself, but to protect me. Paramedics swarmed around us, gently but firmly moving me aside to work on Tyler. I watched, numb with shock and terror, as they cut away his shirt, applied pressure to the wound, started an IV. "BP's dropping," one of them said tersely. "We need to move now." They loaded Tyler onto a stretcher, moving with practiced efficiency toward a waiting ambulance. I followed, stumbling, my clothes soaked with my son's blood. Agent Foster caught my arm, steadying me. "You can go with him," she said, her voice gentle for the first time. "Another agent will accompany you. I'll be right behind." The ride to the hospital passed in a surreal haze. Tyler lost consciousness just as we pulled away from the federal building. The paramedics worked frantically, their voices calm, but their movements urgent. I sat in the corner of the ambulance, Tyler's blood drying on my hands and clothes, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. At the hospital, Tyler was rushed into surgery, leaving me alone in a private waiting room, guarded by 2 marshals. Agent Foster arrived shortly after, her suit jacket gone, her white shirt splattered with blood. Whether Tyler's or someone else's, I couldn't tell. "The shooters got away," she said without preamble, taking the seat beside me. "But we have descriptions, partial plates. We'll find them." "Will that matter?" I asked, my voice hollow. "If Tyler dies, he's not going to die," Foster said firmly. "He's young, strong, and he has the best trauma surgeons in Connecticut working on him." I looked down at my blood-stained hands. He said he turned himself in to protect me, that they threatened me. Foster was quiet for a moment. We found evidence that Delgado's people had been watching your house for weeks. Photos of you coming and going from work. Your schedule. Tyler saw some of those photos when he was at Delgado's office. It's likely what prompted him to contact Detective Sawyer. The realization that strangers had been watching me, documenting my movements, made my skin crawl. But more than that, the knowledge that Tyler had put himself at risk to protect me, the same Tyler who had thrown a picture frame at my head and told me to stay out of his life, broke something open inside me. I put my head in my hands and wept. For the bright-eyed boy who had once roared like a lion, for the troubled young man who had made terrible choices, for the son who had stepped in front of bullets meant for me. I wept until there were no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen. Agent Foster sat beside me in silence, occasionally touching my shoulder in awkward comfort. Eventually, a doctor appeared in the doorway, her surgical cap still on, her expression impossible to read. "Mrs. Reynolds?" she said. "I'm Dr. Patel. I operated on your son." I stood on shaky legs, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. "Is he?" "He's alive," Dr. Patel said, and I nearly collapsed with relief. "But his condition is extremely critical. The bullet punctured his left lung and nicked his heart. We've repaired the damage, but he lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours will be crucial." "Can I see him?" I asked. Dr. Patel nodded. "He's in recovery now. Once he's moved to the ICU, you can sit with him. It might be another hour or so." After she left, Agent Foster turned to me. "Mrs. Reynolds, I need to be very clear about something. What happened today was a coordinated attempt to silence your son. These people now know you're both still alive, and they'll try again. We need to move you both as soon as Tyler is stable enough for transport." I thought of Tyler lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life because he'd tried to protect me. I thought of the shooters who had escaped, who might even now be planning another attempt. I thought of Marcus Delgado, a man I'd never met, but who had nearly taken my son from me. Something hardened inside me, a cold, steely resolve taking the place of fear and grief. "Do whatever you have to do," I told Foster. "But understand this. I won't let them hurt my son again, and if they try, they'll have to go through me first." The ICU room was a symphony of beeping machines and hushed voices. Tyler lay motionless in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to monitors that tracked his fragile hold on life. His face was pale against the white pillow, the bruise above his eyebrow now yellowing at the edges. He looked younger than his 23 years, vulnerable in a way that made my heart ache. I sat beside him, holding his hand, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Each breath, a small victory. 2 U.S. Marshals stood outside the door, visible through the small window. Agent Foster had arranged for round-the-clock protection, though she'd warned me it wasn't a permanent solution. "As soon as he's stable enough to move," she'd said, "we'll need to get you both to a secure location. But for now, Tyler couldn't be moved. The damage to his lung and heart had been extensive, requiring 2 additional surgeries in the 3 days since the shooting. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes recognizing me, sometimes too drugged to know where he was. On the 4th day, as I dozed in the uncomfortable chair beside his bed, my hand still holding his, I felt his fingers tighten around mine. I opened my eyes to find him watching me, his gaze clearer than it had been since the shooting. "Hey," he whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube that had only been removed the day before. "Hey, yourself," I replied, leaning closer. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot," he said, attempting a weak smile that turned into a grimace. "Everything hurts. I'll get the nurse, see if they can give you more pain medication." I started to rise, but his hand tightened on mine. "Wait, just stay a minute." I settled back into the chair, studying his face. Despite the pain evident in the lines around his eyes, there was something different about him, a clarity, a resolve that hadn't been there before. "I remember what happened," he said after a moment. "In the garage, they were aiming at you." I swallowed hard. "The marshals think it was a warning, that they wanted to show they could get to us even in federal custody." Tyler's eyes darkened. "It wasn't a warning, Mom. It was an execution. I heard one of them say your name right before they started shooting." A chill ran through me. "My name?" They said, "Take the woman first. Make the kid watch." "And they wanted me to see you die before they killed me." His voice broke. I couldn't let that happen. I remembered Tyler pushing me down, covering my body with his own. He hadn't just been taking cover. He'd been deliberately placing himself between me and the bullets. "You saved my life," I said softly. He looked away, tears gathering in his eyes. "After everything I did, after how I treated you, you should have let me go into witness protection alone." "Never," I said firmly. "You're my son, Tyler. Nothing changes that." A nurse entered then, checking Tyler's monitors and administering more pain medication. As she worked, I stepped into the hallway where Agent Foster waited. "He's more lucid today," I told her. "He remembers the shooting." Foster's expression sharpened. "Did he see the shooters? Could he identify them?" "I don't know, but he said they specifically targeted me, that they wanted him to watch me die." Foster's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm. "That tracks with Delgado's methods. He likes to make examples of people who cross him or their families. How much longer can we stay here?" I asked, glancing back at Tyler's room. "He's still so weak." "The doctors say another 2 days minimum. After that, if he's stable enough for transport, we have a medical transport plane standing by to move you both to a secure facility." "Where?" Foster shook her head. "I still can't tell you that, but I can say it's far from here, with excellent medical facilities where Tyler can continue his recovery." I nodded, understanding the need for secrecy but hating the uncertainty. "What about the trial? Will Tyler still need to testify?" "Yes, but not for several months. We'll bring him back under heavy security when the time comes." The thought of Tyler facing Marcus Delgado in court, of putting himself at risk again, made my stomach clench with anxiety. But I knew it was necessary if we ever wanted to be truly free of this nightmare. When I returned to Tyler's room, the nurse was finishing up. "He'll be a bit drowsy from the pain meds," she warned me, "but it should help him rest." Indeed, Tyler's eyes were already heavy-lidded when I resumed my seat beside him, but he fought against the medication, struggling to stay awake. "Mom," he slurred, "need to tell you something." "It can wait," I soothed, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "You need to rest." "No, important." He fumbled for my hand. "When I was with Marcus, saw things, documents." I leaned closer, something in his tone alerting me that this wasn't just drug-induced rambling. "What kind of documents, Tyler?" "Blackmail. Politicians, judges, cops." His words were becoming more indistinct as the medication took hold. "Names. I memorized them." The implications of what he was saying hit me like a thunderbolt. If Tyler had seen evidence of corruption among law enforcement and the judiciary, it explained how Delgado had operated with impunity for so long. It also meant that our danger extended beyond Delgado's immediate organization. "Did you tell Agent Foster about this?" I asked urgently. Tyler's eyes fluttered. "Tried to, at the station." Detective said, "Not relevant. Just focus on drugs." My blood ran cold. If a detective had deliberately steered Tyler away from revealing corruption, it suggested the rot went even deeper than we'd thought. "Tyler, this is important," I said, squeezing his hand. "Did you recognize any of the names on those documents?" He was fading fast, his eyes closing despite his efforts to keep them open. "One," he mumbled. "Judge Harrington's brother." Judge Harrington, brother to James Harrington, the assistant U.S. attorney who had offered Tyler the deal. The same man who had been in the conference room when the shooting started. My mind raced. Could it be coincidence? Or was it possible that the attorney handling Tyler's case was connected to the very corruption Tyler had uncovered? Before I could process this information, Tyler's grip on my hand went slack as he succumbed to the medication. I sat frozen in the chair beside him, the implications of what he'd said threatening to overwhelm me. If Harrington's brother was compromised, could Harrington himself be trusted? Had he arranged the deal to get Tyler to testify solely against Delgado, while protecting others who might be implicated? Was he even involved in the attack at the federal building? I needed to tell Agent Foster, but a new wariness held me back. How far did this corruption extend? Who could I trust? For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt truly alone. The institutions I'd counted on for protection, law enforcement, the courts, the witness protection program, suddenly seemed riddled with potential threats. The carefully constructed plan to keep Tyler safe now appeared full of holes. As I watched my son sleep, a new resolve hardened within me. I couldn't rely solely on the marshals or the prosecutors to protect Tyler. I needed to take matters into my own hands. But how? I was a middle-aged English teacher with no experience in criminal investigation or personal protection. What could I possibly do against an organization powerful enough to corrupt judges and law enforcement? Yet as the question formed in my mind, I realized I did have one advantage. No one would expect anything from me. They would see a frightened mother, passive and compliant, grateful for whatever protection was offered. They wouldn't see me as a threat or someone capable of independent action. I could use that. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. For 15 years, I'd defined myself primarily as Tyler's mother, then as a teacher, always in service to others. I'd accepted limitations, sacrificed my own ambitions, played by the rules. And where had it gotten us? My son lying in a hospital bed with a bullet wound in his chest. Both of us marked for death by criminals, and possibly betrayed by the very people sworn to protect us. No more. I gently released Tyler's hand and walked to the window of the ICU room. Outside, the world continued as normal. People going about their lives, unaware of the life and death drama unfolding within these walls. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In that moment, I made a decision. I would play along with the Marshal's plan for now. I would appear cooperative, grateful, perhaps even a bit helpless. But beneath that facade, I would be watching, listening, gathering information, and I would find a way to ensure Tyler's safety, even if it meant going outside the system, even if it meant breaking rules I'd always followed. Tyler stirred in his sleep, a small moan escaping his lips. I returned to his bedside, taking his hand again. "I'm here," I whispered, "and I promise you no one will hurt you again. No one." In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines and the antiseptic smell of illness, Martha Reynolds, the compliant, rule-following English teacher, ceased to exist. In her place stood a woman I barely recognized, calculating, determined, and unafraid to do whatever was necessary to protect her child. For the first time in years, I felt fully awake. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of medical procedures, hushed conversations with doctors, and visits from Agent Foster, who seemed increasingly tense as arrangements were finalized for our transfer. Tyler continued to improve gradually, though he remained weak and in considerable pain. When he was awake and lucid, I avoided mentioning what he'd told me about Judge Harrington, unsure if he even remembered the conversation and unwilling to burden him further. On the morning we were scheduled to leave, I was gathering the few belongings we had, mostly items provided by the Marshals, when there was a soft knock at the door. I turned, expecting to see Agent Foster, but instead found a young nurse I hadn't seen before. "Mrs. Reynolds?" she asked, glancing nervously at the Marshal outside the door. "I have some discharge paperwork for you to sign." "I thought Agent Foster was handling all of that," I said, immediately wary. The nurse looked down at her clipboard. "Yes, but there are some hospital forms that require the patient's family member's signature, insurance and release of liability." It seemed reasonable enough, but something about her demeanor, the way her eyes darted around the room, never quite meeting mine, raised alarm bells. "Can I see some ID?" I asked. Her hand went to the badge clipped to her uniform. "Of course, I'm Jessica Morales. I've been assigned to your son's case for discharge planning." I studied the badge. It looked official, with the hospital logo and her photo. Still, caution made me hesitate. "Let me check with the head nurse first." Her expression flickered with what might have been irritation before smoothing into a professional smile. "Of course. I'll wait here while you do that." I stepped into the hallway, nodding to the Marshal as I passed. At the nurse's station, I found the head nurse, a no-nonsense woman named Linda, who had been caring for Tyler since his arrival. "Is Jessica Morales working discharge planning today?" I asked casually. Linda looked up from her computer, frowning. "Jessica? We don't have a Jessica in this unit." My heart rate accelerated. "Brunette, early 30s, about 5'5". "She's in my son's room right now with discharge papers." Linda's eyes widened. "We haven't started discharge planning for your son yet. He's not scheduled to leave until this afternoon, and that's being handled directly by the federal agents." I was already turning back toward Tyler's room when Linda hit the security button. The Marshal outside Tyler's door must have sensed something was wrong, because he had his hand on his weapon as I approached. "There's an unauthorized person in the room," I said urgently. He immediately drew his gun and pushed open the door. The room was empty except for Tyler, who was sleeping. The woman who had called herself Jessica was gone. "Lock down the floor," the Marshal ordered into his radio. Possible security breach. Unauthorized individual in protective custody room. A code silver announcement came over the hospital PA system, initiating a lockdown. Agent Foster arrived minutes later, her face taut with concern. "What happened?" she demanded. I explained about the fake nurse. Foster immediately ordered a review of the hospital security cameras, while additional marshals arrived to secure the floor. "She didn't get close to Tyler?" Foster asked, eyeing the still sleeping form of my son. "No, I intercepted her at the door," I assured her. "But she had a legitimate-looking hospital ID." Foster's expression darkened. "That suggests inside help. Someone in hospital administration or human resources who could create or steal credentials." The thought that Delgado's reach extended even into this hospital, that even here, surrounded by federal marshals, we weren't truly safe, sent a chill through me. "We need to move you now," Foster said decisively. "The medical transport is ready. We'll take Tyler as he is." Within an hour, Tyler had been carefully transferred to a stretcher, and we were being escorted through a service elevator to an ambulance waiting at a loading dock, away from the main entrance. The efficiency of the operation was impressive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking our movements. The ambulance took us to a small airstrip where a medical transport plane waited. Tyler, still heavily sedated, was loaded aboard with his medical equipment. I followed, my few belongings and a small duffel bag provided by the marshals. "Where are we going?" I asked Foster as we prepared for takeoff. "Minnesota," she replied after a moment's hesitation. "Rochester. They have excellent medical facilities where Tyler can complete his recovery." "Minnesota. About as far from Connecticut as we could get while remaining in the continental United States." I nodded, looking out the small window as the plane began to taxi down the runway. "Agent Foster," I said, watching the landscape of Connecticut, my home for my entire life, disappear beneath us. "There's something I need to tell you." Something Tyler told me. She shifted in her seat to face me. "What is it?" I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. If Harrington was indeed connected to the corruption Tyler had uncovered, sharing this information could put us at even greater risk, but keeping it to myself seemed equally dangerous. Tyler mentioned that while he was working for Delgado, he saw documents, blackmail material on judges, police officers, politicians. I paused, gauging her reaction. He specifically mentioned a Judge Harrington. Foster's expression remained neutral, but I noticed her hand tense on the armrest. "Judge Thomas Harrington? The federal judge?" He didn't give a first name, but he said this judge is the brother of James Harrington, the assistant U.S. attorney handling his case. Foster was silent for a long moment. "That's a serious allegation, Mrs. Reynolds. Do you have any evidence beyond what Tyler told you?" "No," I admitted. "And he was heavily medicated when he mentioned it, but it seemed important. Did he share this information with anyone else? Detective Sawyer, perhaps?" He said he tried to, but the detective told him to focus on the drug charges, that the other information wasn't relevant. Foster's eyes narrowed at this. "That's concerning. Detective Sawyer should have reported any allegations of judicial corruption immediately, regardless of their relevance to the drug case." "Could Sawyer be compromised too?" I asked. "It's possible," Foster said carefully. "We've had concerns about leaks in the Westport PD for some time. That's partly why the Marshal Service took over your protection so quickly." She fell silent again, seemingly lost in thought. I waited, watching her process the information. "Mrs. Reynolds," she finally said, her voice low despite the noise of the plane engines. "I need to be very careful about how I handle this. If what Tyler saw is genuine, it means the corruption extends into the U.S. Attorney's Office, possibly even the federal judiciary. That would explain how Delgado has managed to avoid serious charges for so long. What will you do with this information?" "For now, nothing overt," she said. "I need to verify it independently, through channels I know are secure. If I start asking questions openly, it could alert Harrington or others who might be involved." "Can you do that from Minnesota?" I asked. "No," Foster admitted. "I'll be returning to Connecticut once you're settled. Another marshal will be assigned to your case locally." The thought of losing Foster, the one person in this entire nightmare who had been consistently straightforward with me, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. "Can we trust them? This new marshal?" Foster hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, a thumb drive. "This contains secure contact information for me," a phone number, and an encrypted email address that only I have access to. If anything happens, anything that makes you uncomfortable or afraid, use these to contact me directly. I took the thumb drive, slipping it into my pocket. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Foster said grimly. If Harrington is compromised, and if he suspects Tyler knows about his brother, you may both be in even more danger than we thought. The plane landed in Rochester as night was falling. An ambulance was waiting to transport Tyler to a private medical facility on the outskirts of the city. The building looked more like a luxury spa than a hospital, with landscaped grounds and a discreet security presence. This is a facility used exclusively by the Marshal Service, Foster explained, as Tyler was wheeled inside. Only vetted personnel have access. We were settled into a suite with 2 bedrooms, a small living area, and state-of-the-art medical equipment for Tyler's continuing care. Nursing staff would be available around the clock, and 2 marshals would be stationed outside our door at all times. Tomorrow you'll meet with the team handling your new identities, Foster said, as she prepared to leave. They'll brief you on your cover story, your new documentation, where you'll be living once Tyler is well enough to be discharged. How long will that be? I asked, looking at my son, now settled in a hospital bed that seemed less institutional than the one in Connecticut. A few weeks at least. His injuries were severe, Mrs. Reynolds. He needs time to heal. After Foster left, I sat beside Tyler's bed, watching him sleep. The nurses had assured me the sedatives would wear off soon, that he had tolerated the transport well despite his condition. Still, seeing him so vulnerable, so dependent on machines and medication, made my heart ache. As I sat there, I felt the thumb drive in my pocket, a small, tangible link to a world rapidly disappearing behind us. On impulse, I took it out and examined it. It looked like any standard USB drive, unmarked and unremarkable. I glanced around the room, noting the laptop on a small desk in the corner, provided for our use, Foster had mentioned. Moving quietly so as not to disturb Tyler, I went to the computer and turned it on. The system was password protected, but a small card beside it provided generic login credentials. Once inside, I inserted the thumb drive. What I found was not just contact information for Foster, as she had suggested, but a wealth of files, case notes, surveillance reports, and most surprisingly, background checks on everyone involved in Tyler's case, including James and Thomas Harrington. According to the files, Judge Thomas Harrington had presided over 3 cases involving associates of Marcus Delgado in the past 5 years. In each case, the defendants had received unusually lenient sentences or had charges dismissed entirely due to procedural errors or insufficient evidence. More damning, there were financial records showing large deposits to an offshore account linked to a shell company where Thomas Harrington was listed as a silent partner. The deposits coincided with the dismissals of charges against Delgado's associates. James Harrington's background check was similarly concerning. While there was no direct evidence of financial impropriety, he had a history of plea deals that benefited major drug traffickers in exchange for testimony against smaller operators, effectively allowing the bigger fish to escape serious consequences while creating the appearance of successful prosecutions. But the most shocking discovery came in a file labeled Sawyer, Det, Michael. According to Foster's notes, Detective Sawyer had been under internal affairs investigation for months before Tyler's arrest. There were suspicions he was on Delgado's payroll, serving as an inside source on police operations. The pieces began to fall into place with sickening clarity. Sawyer hadn't dismissed Tyler's information about judicial corruption because it was irrelevant. He'd done so to protect his employers. And the deal offered to Tyler, to testify solely against Delgado, was designed to limit the scope of the investigation, to prevent him from exposing the broader network of corruption. I leaned back in the chair, my mind racing. Had Foster intentionally given me this information? Or had she mistakenly included these files on the drive meant only for emergency contact? Either way, I now possessed dangerous knowledge, information that could get us both killed if the wrong people discovered I had it. As I contemplated what to do with this revelation, a soft sound from Tyler's bed caught my attention. I quickly closed the files and removed the thumb drive, slipping it into my pocket as I moved to his side. His eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition as he saw me. "Mom?" he croaked, his voice rough from intubation during the flight. "Where are we?" "Minnesota," I said, taking his hand. We've been moved to a secure facility." He nodded weakly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. Did I dream telling you about the judge?" "No," I said softly. "That was real, and I think you were right, Tyler." His eyes widened slightly. "Have you told anyone?" "Agent Foster," I admitted, "but I'm not sure who else to trust now." Tyler's grip on my hand tightened. "No one," he whispered urgently. "Trust no one except Foster. Marcus has people everywhere." I thought of the fake nurse at the hospital, the ease with which our security had been breached despite the marshal's presence. I'm beginning to understand that. Tyler's eyes drifted to the window, where darkness had fully fallen. What happens now? It was a question I'd been asking myself since finding the files on Foster's thumb drive. What did happen now? We were thousands of miles from home, hidden away under guard, with new identities awaiting us. But if the corruption extended as far as it seemed, how safe were we really? How long before someone in the Marshal Service, someone compromised like Sawyer, discovered our location? "Now," I said, making my decision. "We protect ourselves. We can't rely solely on others, Tyler. We need a plan of our own." Something shifted in Tyler's expression, a spark of the old determination I remembered from when he was younger. "What kind of plan?" "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. "But it starts with information. And thanks to Agent Foster, we now have quite a bit of that." I showed him the thumb drive, explaining what I'd found. His eyes grew wider as I detailed the extent of the corruption, the connections between Delgado, Judge Harrington, and potentially his brother. "This is bigger than just testifying against Marcus," Tyler said when I'd finished. "This could bring down half the justice system in Connecticut, which is why they want to silence you," I replied, "and why we need insurance. Something to ensure our safety even if the official protection fails." Tyler was silent for a moment, thinking. Then, "The ledger," he said suddenly. "The one I took from Marcus's office. The police have it now, but I made a copy first." I stared at him, stunned. "You what?" "I wasn't sure I could trust the police," he explained. "So before I went to Sawyer, I scanned every page and encrypted the files. I have the encryption key memorized." "Where is this copy?" I asked, hardly daring to hope. "Email account," he said. "One I created just for this. The password is your birthday plus the name of my childhood dog. My birthday plus Rusty, a password no one else would guess, yet one I could easily remember. The account is tyronejefferson85@gmail.com, he continued. The files are in the drafts folder, not sent or received, so they wouldn't leave a trace." I felt a surge of pride mixed with amazement. Even in the midst of his poor choices, Tyler had shown foresight, intelligence. "That's brilliant, Tyler." He managed a weak smile. All those spy movies finally came in handy. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We weren't merely victims, helpless pawns in a game controlled by Delgado and corrupt officials. We had leverage, information that could expose not just a drug operation, but a network of corruption reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement and the judiciary. It wasn't a guarantee of safety. Delgado and his allies would still come for us. But it was power, a kind I'd never possessed before, never even sought, and I intended to use it. "Get some rest," I told Tyler, squeezing his hand. "We have a lot of work to do once you're stronger." As he drifted back to sleep, I returned to the window, looking out at the unfamiliar landscape of Minnesota. Somewhere out there was our new life, with new names and new identities. But first, we had to ensure we survived long enough to claim it. Martha Reynolds, middle-aged English teacher, rule follower, grieving ex-wife, was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone I was just beginning to understand, someone who would not be victimized, would not be silenced, would not be controlled, someone who would fight. The first week in Rochester passed in a blur of medical procedures and meetings with marshals about our new identities. Tyler continued to improve gradually, moving from the bed to a wheelchair, and finally taking short walks around the facility with assistance. The physical therapist praised his determination, unaware that his drive came from more than just a desire to regain his health. We were to become Catherine and Jason Miller, a mother and son relocating to Duluth, Minnesota for my new job as a librarian at a small private college. The backstory was simple. Widowed 5 years earlier, looking for a fresh start away from painful memories. We had documentation, birth certificates, social security cards, driver's licenses, even a fabricated employment history for me and academic records for Tyler. I played along, asking appropriate questions, expressing appropriate gratitude. All the while, I was making my own plans, using the laptop provided to access the email account Tyler had created. The files were exactly where he'd said they would be, dozens of scanned pages from Delgado's ledger, encrypted as he'd promised. With the key Tyler provided, I was able to access them. What I found was staggering. The ledger contained not just records of drug transactions, but detailed accounts of payments to officials, judges, police officers, a state prosecutor, even a congressional aide. Beside each name was a notation of what had been purchased: case dismissals, evidence misplacement, advance warning of raids, legislative influence. Most damning were the entries for Thomas Harrington, with payments totaling over $2 million over 3 years. His brother James appeared as well, though the payments to him were labeled as indirect through a law firm where he had previously worked. I created a secure cloud storage account under a false name, using a prepaid credit card I'd purchased from the hospital gift shop. I uploaded the encrypted files, then made physical copies of the most incriminating pages, which I kept hidden in the lining of my suitcase. During this time, I maintained regular contact with Agent Foster through the secure channel she'd provided, careful never to mention what I'd discovered on the thumb drive or what we were doing with the ledger information. She updated me on the investigation, on preparations for the eventual trial, on security arrangements for when we would be relocated to our permanent location in Duluth. The good news, she told me during one call, is that the attempted breach at the hospital has been contained. The woman who posed as a nurse has been identified as Lucia Vasquez, a known associate of Delgado's. She's in custody, though she's not talking. And the bad news? I asked, sensing there was more. Foster hesitated. James Harrington has been asking questions about your location. Officially, he has a right to know as the prosecutor on the case. But given your concerns about his brother, you haven't told him, have you? I asked, alarmed. No, Foster assured me. I've cited security protocols, but he's persistent, and he has connections in the Marshal's service. I can't keep him in the dark indefinitely without raising suspicions. This confirmed my fears. If Harrington was indeed compromised, he would be looking for ways to locate us, to silence Tyler before he could testify about the broader corruption. What about Detective Sawyer? I asked. Suspended pending an internal investigation, Foster replied, but nothing conclusive yet. After the call ended, I shared the update with Tyler, who was sitting up in a chair for the first time since the shooting. His color was better, his eyes clearer, though he still tired easily. We can't wait for the official investigation, he said, his voice stronger than it had been in days. Harrington will find us eventually. I know, I agreed. We need a contingency plan, something beyond what the Marshals are providing. Over the next few days, as Tyler continued his recovery, we refined our strategy. The ledger information was our primary leverage, but we needed to ensure it would be released if anything happened to us. I set up an automated system that would send the encrypted files to major news outlets and federal agencies if a certain email wasn't sent every 72 hours. Digital dead man's switch, Tyler explained as we tested the system. If we can't check in, it assumes we're compromised and releases everything. But technology alone wasn't enough. We needed allies, people outside the system who could help us if the official protection failed. I thought of my friend Diane from school, who had a brother working as an investigative journalist for the Boston Globe. I'd met him once at a school function and had been impressed by his integrity and determination. Using a secure email address, I reached out to him, providing just enough information to pique his interest without revealing our location. To my relief, he responded, expressing concern and a willingness to help. I didn't share the ledger information with him yet, but established a secure channel of communication we could use if necessary. Tyler, meanwhile, had made a connection of his own, a nurse at the facility named Michael, who had served as a combat medic in Afghanistan before entering civilian healthcare. Michael had taken a liking to Tyler, often staying after his shift to play chess or simply talk. From these conversations, Tyler had determined that Michael was trustworthy, and more importantly, had skills that might prove useful if we needed to move quickly without Marshal support. He has a cabin in northern Minnesota, Tyler told me one evening. Off the grid, hard to find if you don't know where to look. He offered to let us use it if we ever wanted to get away for a weekend once I'm recovered. I raised an eyebrow. And you think he suspects our situation? Tyler shrugged. He worked with special forces in Afghanistan. I think he recognizes security protocols when he sees them. He hasn't asked directly, but he's dropped hints that he understands we're not just ordinary patients. It wasn't much. A journalist contact, a potentially sympathetic nurse with a remote cabin. But it was something. A beginning. Seeds of a network outside the official channels that might save our lives if everything else failed. As Tyler's strength returned, we focused on practical preparations as well. I began taking walks outside the facility, accompanied by a marshal, familiarizing myself with the surroundings, noting escape routes, public transportation options, nearby businesses where one could blend into a crowd. I also started withdrawing small amounts of cash from the stipend provided by the Marshal's service, never enough to raise suspicion but steadily building a reserve. I purchased prepaid phones from different locations, a road atlas of Minnesota, and basic supplies that could be quickly packed if we needed to leave in a hurry. 3 weeks after our arrival in Rochester, Tyler was deemed well enough to be discharged from the medical facility. We were moved to a temporary apartment in the city, still under Marshal protection, to prepare for our eventual relocation to Duluth. The night before we were scheduled to leave Rochester, I received an encrypted message from Agent Foster that sent a chill through me. Security compromised. Harrington accessed file with your location yesterday. Unsure what he knows. Stay alert. We'll call tomorrow with new plan. I showed the message to Tyler, who was sitting at the kitchen table, the remains of our dinner, a meal he'd insisted on cooking himself as part of his recovery, spread before us. We need to move, he said immediately. Tonight, before Foster calls. If Harrington knows we're in Rochester, it's only a matter of time before Delgado's people show up. I nodded, already mentally inventorying what we would need. The marshals outside might not all be trustworthy, Tyler finished my thought. We don't know who Harrington might have contacted in the service. I made a quick decision. I'll call Michael, see if his offer of the cabin still stands. If we can get there, we'll have time to contact Foster securely and arrange a new official location. Tyler agreed. I'll pack while you make the call. Michael answered on the second ring, his voice cautious when I identified myself. I kept the conversation vague but urgent. Remember that weekend getaway you mentioned to Tyler? Is that offer still open? We're feeling a bit confined here. There was a pause. Then, yes, the offer stands. When were you thinking of visiting? Tonight, if possible. Another pause, longer this time. I get off shift at 11. I could meet you at the north exit of the facility around 11:30. Help with directions. We're not at the facility anymore, I said. We're at an apartment about 3 miles east. I know the area, Michael replied, his tone conveying that he understood the real meaning behind our conversation. There's a 24-hour diner called Ricky's on Elm Street. I could meet you in the parking lot at 11:30. Perfect, I said, relief washing over me. Thank you, Michael. This means a lot to us. Pack warm, was his only response before hanging up. Tyler had been listening to my side of the conversation. He's in? Yes. Meeting us at 11:30. That gives us 3 hours to prepare and figure out how to slip past the marshals. Tyler thought for a moment. The bathroom window. It's small, but I think we can both fit through it. It leads to the alley behind the building. I checked the window. Tight, but manageable. We'll need to time it carefully, when both marshals are at the front of the apartment during their shift change. We packed quickly, taking only essentials. Clothes, medications for Tyler, our new IDs, the cash I'd saved, the prepaid phones, and most importantly, the copies of the ledger pages and the thumb drive from Foster. Everything fit into 2 backpacks, easily carried even by Tyler in his weakened state. At 11:15, right during the marshal shift change, we made our move. Tyler went first, wincing as he squeezed through the narrow bathroom window, but managing to lower himself to the alley below. I followed, less gracefully but successfully, pulling our backpacks after me. We stayed in the shadows, moving quickly but carefully through back streets until we reached Ricky's diner. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few trucks belonging to late-night patrons. We positioned ourselves behind a dumpster, watching for any sign of pursuit or surveillance. At precisely 11:30, a battered pickup truck pulled into the lot. Michael stepped out, dressed in civilian clothes rather than his usual scrubs, and made a show of checking his phone while scanning the area. I flashed the light of my phone once, our prearranged signal. Michael spotted us and nodded subtly, returning to his truck. We waited until he had pulled around to our hiding spot, before emerging from the shadows and quickly climbing into the vehicle. Tyler in the passenger seat, me in the back amid fishing gear and camping supplies. You two picked a hell of a time for a camping trip, Michael said conversationally as he pulled out of the lot, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Weather report says storm's coming. Well, we're not afraid of a little rain, Tyler replied, matching his casual tone. Good, because we've got about a 3-hour drive ahead of us, and the last hour is on dirt roads. Michael glanced at me in the mirror. You sure about this? There's no turning back once we're off the grid. I met his gaze steadily. We're sure. And thank you, Michael. I know we're putting you at risk. He shrugged. I've been in riskier situations. Besides, I like you too. You remind me of my sister and nephew back in Oregon. He paused. I don't need to know the details of why you're running, but I should ask. Are you the good guys in this story? Because I've got a pretty strict policy about which side I take in conflicts. I thought of the ledger, of the corruption it revealed, of Tyler's attempt to make things right despite the danger. Yes, I said confidently. We're the good guys. Michael nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then let's get you somewhere safe. As we drove north through the darkness, leaving Rochester and the marshals and our official protection behind, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. We were on our own now, vulnerable, but also free to make our own decisions, to protect ourselves in ways the system had failed to do. I looked at Tyler, his profile illuminated by the dashboard lights. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty, there was a determination in his expression that reminded me of the boy he had been before all this began. The boy who had stood up to bullies, who had driven me to work each morning, who had promised to make me proud. We caught each other's eye, and a silent understanding passed between us. Whatever happened next, we would face it together. Mother and son, partners now in a dangerous game where the stakes were our very lives. Michael's cabin, when we finally reached it after hours on increasingly remote roads, was exactly what we needed. Isolated, defensible, stocked with provisions. As dawn broke over the pine trees surrounding the small structure, I stood on the porch, watching the mist rise from the small lake below, and allowed myself a moment of hope. We had made it this far. We had the ledger, evidence that could expose the corruption threatening us. We had allies, however few. And most importantly, we had each other. The marshals would be discovering our absence right about now. Foster would be frantic, possibly believing we had been taken rather than having left voluntarily. I would need to contact her soon, to explain our decision, to arrange a new official protection plan. But first, we needed rest. Tyler was exhausted from the journey, his still healing body pushed to its limits. Michael had shown us the cabin's features, the generator, the satellite phone for emergencies, the hidden cellar access if we needed to hide quickly, before heading back to Rochester to maintain his normal routine and avoid suspicion. I checked that Tyler was sleeping soundly in one of the small bedrooms, before sitting down at the rough wooden table with my laptop. Using the satellite connection Michael had provided, I composed an encrypted message to Foster. We are safe. Location compromised as you warned. Have moved to secure location independently. We'll contact again in 24 hours with proposed meeting point. Trust no one, especially Harrington. I hit send, then powered down the laptop. Outside, the sun was fully up now, casting dappled light through the pine branches. Birds called to each other across the lake. It was beautiful, peaceful, a stark contrast to the danger we had fled. But I wasn't fooled by the tranquility. This was merely a pause, a moment to catch our breath before the next phase of our struggle began. Delgado and his corrupted allies would not stop looking for us. The trial date was still approaching. Decisions would need to be made about how to use the ledger information, who to trust, how to ensure our safety long-term. For now, though, we had bought ourselves time and space to prepare, and I intended to use every moment of it. The cabin became our war room over the next 2 weeks. With Michael's help, we established secure communications with Agent Foster, who was both relieved to hear we were safe and frustrated by our independent action. After intense negotiation, we reached a compromise. We would remain at the cabin until just before the trial, with Foster as our only official contact. She would report to her superiors that we had been moved to a new safe location following the security breach, without specifying where. I'm putting my career on the line for you, she told me during one encrypted call. I hope you understand that. I do, I assured her. And I promise, when this is over, the truth will vindicate you. Tyler continued to regain his strength, walking farther each day around the property, helping with chores, even fishing in the lake. The physical activity seemed to heal more than just his body. There was a clarity to his eyes, a purpose to his movements that had been missing for years. Meanwhile, I focused on building our case. Using the ledger information, I created detailed timelines connecting payments to specific judicial decisions, police actions, and legislative changes. I researched each named official, gathering publicly available information about their careers, financial situations, and connections to Delgado's organization. I also maintained contact with Diane's brother at the Boston Globe, sharing select pieces of information to help him build his own investigation without revealing our full hand. He provided valuable insights in return, including news that an internal affairs investigation into corruption in the Westport Police Department had been suddenly and inexplicably shut down. Sources tell me it came from the top, he wrote in one message. A federal prosecutor made a call, and the whole thing went away. James Harrington, undoubtedly. Further confirmation of his involvement, his determination to protect the corrupt network his brother was part of. The trial date was approaching, just 3 weeks away now. According to Foster, Delgado's defense team was filing motion after motion to delay, likely buying time to locate us. So far, the judge assigned to the case, a federal judge from out of state, specifically brought in to avoid conflicts of interest, had denied each request. They're getting desperate, Foster told us during a rare in-person visit to the cabin. Delgado knows the case against him is strong, especially with Tyler's testimony, but he's more concerned about what else Tyler might reveal. Like the judicial corruption, I said. Foster nodded grimly. Exactly. Which is why I've been investigating very carefully, and I found something interesting. She pulled a file from her briefcase. James Harrington has scheduled a meeting with Tyler 3 days before the trial, a standard pre-testimony preparation session. I'm not meeting with him, Tyler said immediately. Not alone. You won't have to, Foster assured him. I'll be there, along with the judge. But here's what's interesting. Harrington specifically requested that the meeting take place at a particular hotel in Hartford, not at the federal building where such meetings are normally held. Why? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Officially, for security reasons, fewer people, more controlled environment. Unofficially, Foster let the implication hang. A setup, Tyler finished. Get me somewhere less secure, away from federal building protocols. Foster nodded. That would be my guess, but it gives us an opportunity. To do what? I asked. To set our own trap, she replied. To get Harrington to reveal himself, on record, in a way that can't be disputed or covered up. The plan took shape over the next several days. Tyler would agree to the meeting, with conditions that would appear to give Harrington an advantage, while actually placing him in a position to incriminate himself. Foster would ensure that federal agents loyal to her, not to Harrington, would be providing security. And I would be there, not as Martha Reynolds' concerned mother, but as an active participant in the operation. It's risky, Foster warned. If Harrington suspects anything, if he's more careful than we anticipate, he won't be, Tyler said with unexpected confidence. I've dealt with these people, remember? They're arrogant. They believe they're untouchable. That's their weakness. The day before we were to return to Connecticut, I received an encrypted message from Diane's brother at the Globe. Attached was a draft of an article he planned to publish the morning of the Harrington meeting, detailing the broader investigation into judicial corruption without naming specific judges or revealing our connection to the case. Its publication would serve as additional pressure on Harrington, making him more likely to act rashly. That night, unable to sleep, I found Tyler sitting on the cabin's porch, looking out at the moonlit lake. I joined him on the weathered bench, pulling my sweater tighter against the chill. Nervous about tomorrow? I asked. Terrified, he admitted with a small smile. But also, ready? Does that make sense? Perfect sense, I replied. I feel the same way. We sat in companionable silence for a moment before Tyler spoke again. Mom, I need to say something before we go back. About everything that happened, how I treated you. I placed my hand over his. You don't need to. I do, he insisted. I was so lost, so angry at everything. At Dad for leaving, at the world for being unfair, at myself for failing. And instead of facing those feelings, I took them out on you. the one person who never gave up on me. His voice broke, and in the moonlight, I could see tears shining in his eyes. When I saw those men aiming at you in the garage, something snapped into place. All the confusion and anger just vanished, and I knew with absolute clarity that nothing in the world mattered more than keeping you safe. That's why I stepped in front of those bullets. Not because I was brave, but because I couldn't bear the alternative. "Oh, Tyler," I whispered, my own eyes filling with tears. "Whatever happens tomorrow, or at the trial, or beyond," he continued, "I need you to know that I'm sorry, and that I love you, and that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of everything you've sacrificed for me." I pulled him into an embrace, careful of his still healing chest wound. "You already are worthy," I told him fiercely. "You always have been." We held each other as the moon continued its arc across the sky, mother and son bound by blood and experience and a love that had withstood the worst the world could throw at us. Tomorrow would bring danger, uncertainty, the culmination of our careful planning. But in that moment, on a porch in the Minnesota wilderness, we found a measure of peace. The journey back to Connecticut was tense but uneventful. Foster had arranged secure transport, and we arrived at a safe house outside Hartford the evening before the scheduled meeting with Harrington. Final preparations were made, recording devices checked, agents briefed, contingency plans established. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. at the Hartford Marriott. Tyler and I arrived an hour early, escorted by Foster and 2 trusted agents. We were shown to a suite on the 12th floor that had been swept for surveillance devices and secured. Tyler wore a nearly invisible wire, and cameras had been discreetly installed in the meeting room. "Remember," Foster said as we waited, "the goal is to get him to implicate himself. Let him think he has the upper hand. Let him believe you're scared and willing to cooperate with whatever he suggests." Tyler nodded, his expression calm despite the gravity of the situation. "I'm ready." At precisely 10 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Foster answered, admitting James Harrington, tall, distinguished, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the confident expression of a man accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room. "Agent Foster," he greeted her cordially before turning to us. "Mrs. Reynolds, Tyler, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I know the past weeks have been challenging for you both." His gaze lingered on me a beat too long, assessing, calculating. I kept my expression neutral, playing the role of the concerned but somewhat overwhelmed mother. "Shall we get started?" Harrington suggested, setting his briefcase on the conference table. "I've prepared some materials to help Tyler with his testimony." "Of course," Foster replied, though I was expecting Judge Wilkins to join us, as discussed. A flicker of annoyance crossed Harrington's face. The judge was called away on an urgent matter. He sends his apologies. This was unexpected, a deviation from the plan. Foster and I exchanged a quick glance. Without the judge present, would Harrington be as likely to reveal himself, or had he somehow discovered our trap? "Well, let's proceed," Foster said smoothly. "I'm sure Tyler is eager to review the materials." Harrington opened his briefcase, removing a folder which he slid across the table to Tyler. "These are the key points we'll want to focus on during your testimony. The drug operations, the specific deals you witnessed, Delgado's direct involvement." Tyler opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. I noticed his eyebrows rise slightly. "This seems limited," he said carefully. "There's nothing here about the ledger or the payments to officials." Harrington's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. "That's correct. Those elements aren't relevant to the case against Delgado. We're focusing on the drug trafficking charges, which have the strongest evidence. But the corruption is part of how he operated," Tyler pressed, following our script. "It's how he avoided prosecution for so long." Harrington leaned forward. "Tyler, let me be frank. Allegations of judicial corruption are extremely serious and require extraordinary evidence. The ledger alone isn't sufficient, especially given your complicated history with the truth." "What are you suggesting, Mr. Harrington?" Foster asked, her tone neutral but watchful. "Simply that we stick to what we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt," Harrington replied smoothly. "Drug trafficking, weapons charges, conspiracy, those will put Delgado away for life. Pursuing these other allegations would only complicate the case unnecessarily." I decided it was time to enter the conversation. "Unnecessarily for whom, Mr. Harrington? For justice, or for certain individuals named in the ledger?" His gaze snapped to me, reassessing. "Mrs. Reynolds, I understand your concern, but these matters are best left to those with legal expertise. Like your brother, Judge Thomas Harrington? I asked innocently. The same judge who dismissed charges against 3 of Delgado's associates in the past 5 years? The change in Harrington was subtle, but unmistakable. A tightening around the eyes, a slight flush creeping up his neck. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm stating facts. Facts that are documented in Delgado's ledger, along with payments to your brother totaling over $2 million. Harrington glanced at Foster, who was watching the exchange with an impassive expression. Agent Foster, I'm not sure what Mrs. Reynolds has been told, but these accusations are completely unfounded. Are they? Tyler interjected. Because I saw the ledger, Mr. Harrington. I saw your name in it too, under indirect payments through Brewster & Klein, your former law firm. Harrington's composure slipped further. New stir. Harrington's composure slipped further. This is outrageous, he snapped, the smooth attorney facade cracking. You're making dangerous accusations without evidence, and I won't sit here and... We have the evidence, I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Complete copies of the ledger. Every page, every name, every payment, including the offshore account in the Caymans where your brother's payments were sent. Harrington's face paled. That's impossible. The police confiscated... The original, yes, Tyler said. But I made copies before turning it over. Insurance, you might say. Harrington's eyes darted to the door, calculating. Foster shifted slightly, her hand moving closer to her weapon. Let me be clear about what's happening here, I continued, leaning forward. We know everything, Mr. Harrington. We know about your brother's rulings in favor of Delgado's associates. We know about your role in arranging plea deals that protected the corruption network. We know about Detective Sawyer feeding information to Delgado about police operations. And we know, Tyler added, that you arranged the attack at the federal building, that you wanted me dead before I could testify about any of this. Harrington's mask slipped completely then, a cold fury replacing his professional demeanor. You have no idea what you're dealing with, he hissed. Delgado is just one part of a system much larger than you can imagine. Even if you have copies, who do you think will believe a drug dealer and his mother over a federal prosecutor? Over a federal judge? The FBI, for starters. Came a new voice from the doorway. We all turned to see a woman in a dark suit, flanked by 2 agents. She held up a badge. Special Agent Rebecca Chen, FBI Public Corruption Unit. James Harrington, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder. Harrington lunged for his briefcase, but Foster was faster, drawing her weapon and training it on him. Don't, she warned. It's over, James. As the FBI agents moved to handcuff Harrington, he fixed Tyler and me with a look of pure hatred. Delgado will find you, he promised, his voice low and venomous. No witness protection program can hide you forever. You'll never stop looking over your shoulders. I met his gaze without flinching. Maybe, I acknowledged. But here's what you don't understand, Mr. Harrington. We're not afraid anymore. As Harrington was led away, Agent Chen approached us. Well done, both of you. We've been building a case against the Harrington brothers for months, but we needed someone on the inside, someone with direct evidence. Your cooperation has been invaluable. What happens now? Tyler asked. Now, Chen replied. We roll up the entire network. Judges, police officers, politicians. Everyone named in that ledger will be investigated. As for Delgado, with Harrington's arrest, we've removed one of his key protectors. His trial will proceed, but with a different prosecutor. And us? I asked. Harrington's right about one thing. Delgado will still want us silenced. Chen nodded grimly. That's true. Which is why we're offering you a place in a special witness security program, one handled directly by the FBI rather than the Marshal's service, to eliminate any possibility of another breach. Foster, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. It's a good offer, Martha. The most secure option available. I looked at Tyler, silently asking the question that would determine our future. He considered for a moment, then nodded. We accept, I told Chen. On one condition. What's that? We testify together. Not just Tyler, but both of us. I've been part of this from the beginning. I've seen the evidence, and I want to face Delgado in court myself. Chen exchanged a glance with Foster. That's unusual, but given the circumstances, I think we can arrange it. As the room cleared, with agents collecting equipment and evidence. Tyler and I stood by the window, looking out at the Hartford skyline. "Are you sure about testifying?" he asked quietly. "It puts you at even greater risk." "I'm sure," I replied. "We started this together. We'll finish it together." The trial of Marcus Delgado began 2 weeks later, with unprecedented security measures in place. Tyler and I were housed in a secure location, transported to and from the courthouse via different routes each day, surrounded at all times by FBI agents. The media coverage was extensive, especially after Diane's brother at the Boston Globe published his explosive exposé on judicial corruption in Connecticut, naming names and providing evidence from the ledger. Public outrage was immediate and intense, with protests outside courthouses and calls for investigations into every case touched by the implicated officials. When my turn came to testify, I walked to the witness stand with my head high, feeling a strange calm despite the circumstances. Delgado sat at the defense table, his expression cold and calculating as he watched me take the oath. The new prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Eliza Washington, led me through my testimony, the threats against Tyler and me, the attack at the federal building where Tyler was shot, the evidence of corruption we had uncovered. I spoke clearly and confidently, meeting Delgado's gaze whenever he looked my way. During cross-examination, Delgado's attorney tried to portray me as a hysterical mother, willing to believe anything to protect her criminal son. I remained composed, answering each question with the same steady resolve. "Mrs. Reynolds," the defense attorney asked with exaggerated patience, "isn't it possible that your son invented these allegations of corruption to reduce his own culpability in the drug operation?" "No," I replied simply. "The evidence speaks for itself. The ledger, the financial records, the pattern of judicial decisions, these aren't inventions. They're facts. Facts that conveniently came to light only after your son was facing serious charges," he countered. "Facts that nearly got both of us killed," I corrected him. "Facts that led to James Harrington's arrest and the ongoing investigation into 12 other officials. Facts that your client was willing to commit murder to keep hidden." The attorney had no effective response to that. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I walked past the defense table where Delgado sat. He leaned forward slightly, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "This isn't over." I paused, turning to face him directly. "For you," I said quietly. "It is." The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. Delgado was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. In the weeks that followed, arrests continued throughout the corruption network. Judges, police officers, prosecutors, all facing federal charges based on evidence from the ledger and subsequent investigations. Tyler and I watched the news coverage from our temporary FBI safe house, preparing for our transition to new identities, new locations, new lives. "Do you regret any of it?" Tyler asked me one evening as we packed the few belongings we would take with us. "Getting involved, putting yourself at risk?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that you were hurt, but I don't regret standing up to them, exposing the truth." He nodded, understanding. "I keep thinking about what you said to Harrington in that hotel room. We're not afraid anymore. Was that true?" "It is now," I told him, realizing as I spoke that it was indeed true. The fear that had driven us to flee Rochester, to hide in Michael's cabin, to set our own trap, that fear had been replaced by something stronger. Not fearlessness, exactly, but a certainty that whatever came next, we would face it together, with clear eyes and steady hearts. 3 years have passed since the Delgado trial. 3 years since Tyler and I stepped into new identities, new lives, in a place far from Connecticut. 3 years of healing, of rebuilding, of rediscovering who we are beneath the layers of trauma and fear. We live in a small town in the Pacific Northwest now, close enough to the ocean that I can hear the waves from my bedroom window on stormy nights. I teach literature at the local community college. Not English, as I did before, but world literature, expanding my horizons in ways I never had time for in my previous life. My students know me as Ellen Davis, a widow from the Midwest who moved west seeking a fresh start. They don't know about the bulletproof glass in my office window, or the panic button disguised as a paperweight on my desk. Tyler, now David, works at a local nonprofit that helps at-risk youth find alternatives to drugs and crime. The irony isn't lost on either of us. but there's a poetic rightness to it that brings me comfort. He's good at the work, connecting with teenagers who remind him of himself before everything went wrong. His experience gives him credibility with them. His redemption gives them hope. The physical scars of his injuries have faded to silvery lines across his chest. The emotional scars run deeper, but are healing in their own way. He's in therapy, working through the guilt and trauma. He's made friends here, genuine ones who know nothing of his past. He's even started dating a kind, steady woman who works at the local library. Nothing serious yet, but a step toward normalcy that once seemed impossible. We don't talk about Connecticut often, though we keep track of developments from a distance. Marcus Delgado remains in maximum security, his appeals exhausted. James Harrington is serving 20 years for corruption and conspiracy. His brother received a similar sentence. The broader investigation led to over 30 convictions, including 6 judges, 12 police officers, and 4 state legislators. A federal oversight committee was established to review every case handled by the corrupt officials, leading to dozens of overturned convictions and released prisoners. Diane's brother at the Boston Globe won a Pulitzer for his coverage of the scandal. Agent Foster was promoted to a leadership position in the Marshal Service's Witness Protection Program, implementing new security protocols based on lessons learned from our case. Detective Sawyer turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence, providing information that helped dismantle what remained of Delgado's organization. And Richard, Tyler's father? He reached out through channels established by the FBI, expressing concern after learning about what had happened. Too little, too late. Tyler declined to respond. Some wounds may never fully heal. Our FBI handlers check in periodically, updating our security assessments. The threat level has decreased over time but remains significant enough that we maintain our cover identities, our vigilance, our careful habits. We don't use social media. We vary our routines. We have contingency plans for emergencies. But we also live. We've made this house a home, with a garden I tend each spring, and a workshop where Tyler builds furniture as a hobby. We host small dinner parties for colleagues and friends. We hike in the mountains on weekends, feeling the sun on our faces and the wind in our hair. We laugh, genuinely, frequently, something that once seemed inconceivable. Last week, I found Tyler sitting on our back porch, staring out at the sunset with a pensive expression. I joined him, sensing he had something on his mind. "I've been thinking about identity," he said after a while. "About who we are versus who we pretend to be." "What brought this on?" I asked. He shrugged. "One of the kids at the center today, he asked me if I ever did drugs when I was younger. I told him yes, without getting into details. Then he asked if I regretted it. What did you say? I said I regretted the harm I caused, but not the lessons I learned. He turned to face me. Was that honest? Or am I just romanticizing my mistakes? I considered his question carefully. I think it's both honest and incomplete, which is true of most things we tell ourselves about our past. You did cause harm, to yourself, to others, to me, and you did learn valuable lessons from those mistakes. But there's more to your story than either of those things. Like what? Like the courage it took to turn against Delgado, the willingness to face consequences, the determination to rebuild your life from the ashes of the old one. I reached over and took his hand. Like the fact that you stepped in front of bullets meant for me. He squeezed my hand, emotion flickering across his face. Sometimes I worry that I'm still that angry kid who threw the picture frame at you. That underneath David, Tyler is just waiting to make another terrible decision. We all contain multitudes, I told him. The people we were, the people we are, the people we might become. The trick isn't to erase the past, but to learn from it. To choose, each day, which parts of ourselves we nurture and which parts we leave behind. We sat in companionable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, an osprey circled over the water, hunting for fish in the last light of day. "Mom," Tyler said finally, using the name that belonged to our old life, to our true selves beneath the carefully constructed identities. "Do you ever regret following me into this life, giving up everything you had?" I looked at my son, no longer the angry young man who had thrown a frame at my head, nor the frightened boy who had begged for help from a jail cell, but someone new, someone stronger, and wiser for having traveled through fire. I didn't give up everything, I told him. I brought the only thing that mattered. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Ellen Davis looking back at me with Martha Reynolds' eyes. The hair was different, styled and colored to match my new identity. There were more lines around the eyes, evidence of both stress and laughter. But beneath the surface changes, I recognized myself, the essential core that remained constant despite everything we had endured. 3 years ago, when Tyler threw that picture frame at my head and told me to stay out of his life, I couldn't have imagined where the path would lead us. From a Connecticut kitchen, to a Minnesota cabin, to a courtroom where we helped bring down a criminal empire. From a mother and son locked in conflict, to partners in survival, to something new and precious. 2 people who had seen each other at their worst and their best, who had chosen each other despite everything, who had built a new life from the fragments of the old. There are still moments of fear, of course. Nights when a car backfiring sends me into a momentary panic. Days when an unfamiliar face watching me too long in the grocery store triggers alarm bells. The price of our past will never be fully paid. The vigilance never completely abandoned. But there are other moments too. Tyler laughing with his colleagues at a barbecue in our backyard. My students' faces lighting up when they connect with a text from a world away. The simple pleasure of walking along the beach as the tide comes in, feeling the sand between my toes and the sun on my shoulders. In those moments, I understand something I couldn't have grasped during those terrifying days on the run. Survival isn't just about escaping death. It's about reclaiming life, in all its messy, glorious complexity. Tonight, as I turn out the light and settle into bed, I send a silent thought of gratitude into the darkness, for second chances, for new beginnings, for the strength I never knew I had until I needed it. And most of all, for my son, who shouted at me to stay out of his life in anger, then begged me for help in desperation, and who now walks beside me in a journey neither of us could have anticipated but both of us have chosen. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own joys. We'll face them as we have faced everything else these past 3 years, together, clear-eyed, unafraid, not as Martha and Tyler Reynolds from Westport, Connecticut, not as Ellen and David Davis from the Pacific Northwest, but as ourselves, mother and son, survivors, partners in a story still being written, a story that began with broken glass and angry words, continued through gunfire and betrayal, and has led us here, to this moment of quiet grace, this hard-won peace, a story that isn't over yet,